Allan Zapadinsky, what's up, brother?
How you
Good
doing,
to see
Rich?
you.
Good to see you outside the Giants games.
Yeah, how's everything going? How's you been?
Busy running around New York and New Jersey, doing some real estate. Yeah,
Doing your thing?
doing my thing.
How's the family? How's the kids?
Family's great. 2 little boys, still running around and going to birthday parties seemingly every weekend. I think that's part of it, huh?
It's the fun part. Enjoy it.
I do
Gets
enjoy
over.
it.
Ends quick. Ends quick. So let's just get right into it. Let's talk about you. Where did you grow up, Allan? Where'd you come from? Like,
So my family came over from Moldova with my sister. She was about 8 years old.
Okay.
We settled in Brooklyn. I was the first in my family born here. Parents lived in that apartment for 35 years. I shared a room with my sister for a lot of those
what
years.
part of Brooklyn?
Borough Park area.
Oh, okay.
And, about 12 years old, my dad and I were watching tennis on TV. Goes, hey, do you want to play? I was like, okay, sure, why not? And then sort of my life took another turn, actually. So I wound up playing tennis for about 8 years up to a professional level.
You had a scholarship?
Got a scholarship to private school, Poly Prep in Brooklyn, and then to Cornell.
Oh, wow.
And so
You didn't get in there on the brains. You got there.
definitely not.
the tennis.
Definitely not. I knew knew the guidance counselor there, and between the tennis,
And
the
your
rest is
C
history.
average, and you're
My
good.
C average somehow got us in there. Yeah. But my childhood was basically, getting up at 6 a.m. and practicing tennis before school for an hour and a half every single day for about 7 years.
Wow.
And then 2 or 3 hours afterwards. I'd even come out to Long Island to practice.
That's pretty crazy.
From Brooklyn.
What you ever play team sports or just tennis?
Could throw a football and play, casually with friends, but tennis is the real sport where I actually got really close to my dad, and we traveled around the country and playing tournaments. And
So your number one sport was tennis.
Yeah.
But did you ever play organized sports like team? Because I'm just trying to figure out the difference between, because I obviously played team sports. What's the difference when it's individual? Like, how do you practice and what's the focus on? Because again, in team sport, one guy messes up, the whole team, has to pay for it. In tennis, like what's the accountability like, for just the one? Did you play partners or?
I played a little bit of doubles, but for the most part, it was all singles. And so your, training sessions outside of the tennis court, running and sprinting and weights and all that, that's on you.
But is it like a team in school? And
Well, you'd have other players that I was practicing with, and so we kind of support each other. One of the guys that got to Wimbledon semifinals was one of my practice partners.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
So playing with people that are above you and better than you is sort of how I kind of, was able to get better.
What's the level up like? Like, how do you do that in tennis?
It's mental, I think, is what comes up from, I was talented enough where I, 130-mile-an-hour serve.
Oh, wow.
And I practiced with people that used to train professional, like top 10 players in the world. They said, Allan, your talent's incredible. I saw better shots in 1 hour with you than I did with, coaching Sampras for years.
That's insane.
Which is a crazy compliment. But the difference is, you got to really love it and want it and have that stronger mental toughness, which, makes a difference.
Because in a team, you're getting pushed by your teammates, obviously. Where in singles, I guess
It's all all the pressure is all on you. There's nobody can come in and take over the if you're losing a match, take over. And at the time, you couldn't even do coaching. Like now, watch tennis. It's wild. You can actually yell out on the court, and people, you can coach it.
You couldn't do that back then?
Could not do that. No, you'd have to do like some signals or something. And
Oh, wow.
if you want to get away with that, but it wasn't allowed.
Wow.
No, it's all on you. You have to figure it all out, and one day you have your superior in your stroke and your talents, but somebody that's more consistent and just runs down every ball can beat you.
Wow. I know we talked about it. It's just I never really thought about it in that way. I knew a couple tennis players, but they were more to themselves when playing. But they also played other sports, and they backed onto the tennis. And I think they were better tennis players at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, we still did stuff like I did stuff like watching tape of watching matches and going up to the U.S. Open. I used to go to Flushing and watch all the players practicing before all the matches. For me, it's always been a good, even tapping into the real estate at some point, just to be able to see and shadow somebody has always been like a real important part of my my real estate career that's carried over from tennis.
Before we get into that, you go to Cornell.
Yeah.
When did you go to Cornell and you played tennis with him, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I played my first year, and then I sort of burnt out. It was it's too much for school and college life and doing tennis at the same time. And it started out pre-med, and it was just too much to handle, so something had to give, and it wound up being the tennis.
So, yeah, you don't want to give up your education, obviously.
Yeah.
Cornell education, it's pretty big. So you finished college. What did you get into?
So my brother-in-law was in the jewelry business for many years. And
Great guy.
And so I didn't know what I wanted to do. I got out of Cornell. I bartended for 6 months. My parents were not thrilled. And then my brother-in-law basically said, hey, come, I'll show you the ropes. And I worked with him for about 10 years, we did manufacturing for various chain stores, small stores throughout the country. So it's sort of where I got my sales.
What did you go to school
there.
for, though?
I was a psych major.
Psych.
Yeah, it's called human development. It doesn't. It's a little.
I'm sure it helped you a lot in sales.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of the courses we took were psych and psychology of decisions and how to speak and that kind of thing. And took some hotel classes. The hotel school, hospitality school at Cornell is the number one in the world. It's amazing. Right? And so we did some classes there. And so it was just like a really cold and snowy environment, but it was also sort of where I got my initial skills for adult life.
And with that, so how much of that did you bring over into the jewelry business and then eventually into the real estate?
I think my energy. The day one of being in the the jewelry business, I went to a jewelry show in Las Vegas, actually. And my brother-in-law had some sales reps that were doing this for 15, 20 years. And this was my first time selling jewelry to mom and pop shops in a kind of a exhibit hall, right? And I outsold his top rep at that show the first time I did it. And that was just because of my energy and my sense of humor and also my ability to just sort of just be genuine. I think that's where I sort of got some of the skills from. I owe my brother-in-law a lot for that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And then what else did you take from that psych major into like how do you compare it into today's age where you're talking to a client, listing agent, listing a house?
It's really interesting actually because on a transaction you have 6 potential egos to deal with, right? You have your buyer, your seller, your buyer agent, your seller agent. You have your attorney for the buyer. So you have 6
mortgage
different
guy,
mortgage guys. There's at least 6 people, if not more or less, a little bit. Yep. And so being able to manage your own ego and then being able to understand the psychology of why people are saying and doing what they do with 5 or 6 others and making sure is, being able to play nicely in the sandbox, which, has its challenges with real estate agents.
Absolutely. So you're in sales with the jewelry business. You're doing really well.
Yeah.
What made you want to get into, what forced you into real estate?
So my father passed sort of tragically. And at that time,
sorry about that.
Thanks. I kind of just sat there where I was at 35, and it wasn't as meaningful doing the jewelry business. And then my dad passed, and then I had to sell my apartment. I had a relationship that didn't work out, and we wound up having this apartment that I basically couldn't afford. And I was traveling from Queens to Brooklyn to Manhattan, and my mother had some health issues, and I gave the listing over to an agent, and he basically wasted 2 years of my life.
2 years?
2 years. And he was taking, clients to go see my apartment and say, hey, I got something better down the hall.
Oh, wow.
I even sent one of my friends in as a kind of a
tester
to go and check it out. And I was blown away by the importance of what I needed this place sold. I couldn't afford it. I was traveling a lot. Nobody would come visit me in Queens. All my friends are in the city.
Sure.
And I fired the agent. I did it on my own, which I don't recommend now because I lost a bunch of money. But I realized the meaningfulness and the importance versus the jewelry. I never saw the end client with somebody putting a ring on their finger. We supplied stores. I don't know the end person. It was just a kind of a cold experience.
Well, it's a money exchange. That's all.
It's all it was. And can you get me this ring at this time? Yes, great, we did. And so the real estate business, which I found really really important and fascinating, is that there's good reasons why people sell and buy, and then there's sad reasons, and there's a whole bunch of financial reasons and things in between. And you got to have somebody there that can navigate that and help you and be doing the right things. And I basically swore that once I got my license and I sold my own place, that I would do things differently. than I experienced.
Then you experienced, okay. And then what was that one thing that you did do, differently from that real estate agent? Was it caring a little bit more? Was it just more the hospitality of it? We talked about this a lot. When I got into the business, I was a Harvey McKay guy.
Yeah, it's great.
Right, and you learn as much as you can about your clients, and then you cater to them to give them the best experience that they could have, imagine.
Memorable.
But yeah, and it actually took my career to where I never thought it would go because of it, and the hospitality and just making those clients feel warm and sweet. And then as I grew, again, this is not my story, it's yours. I got to the part where it was just basically taking my listings, throwing them up against the wall, seeing if they stuck. If they sold, great. If not, no big deal. Yeah. And that's when Jeannie came in and really brought the hospitality to the next level. You seem like you were a hospitality guy from day one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think caring the most and willing to do anything to protect my client from the process. There's 5 or 6 different places people that can make the transaction more or less go south or sideways or successfully. I found that the biggest difference that I can bring is that I care the most, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to protect the client from the process, from their own beliefs about the business. And I think that to me is probably the most critical thing that I bring to the table. I will do as I say, and at least try and get you close to that result you're looking for, and being honest about it.
Sure.
Which I didn't get, and so every time I do a transaction, I've done over 1,600 at this point in 10 years.
Wow, God bless.
I don't have any negatives. I have clients that even disagreed with me at things, but at the end of the day, if I gave you a testimonial, you can call them up and they'll say, "Hey, Allan, I butted heads, but at the end of the day, he's the real deal," and he got it done.
So when did you start real estate? When did you get into it?
Just about 10 years ago.
What year? 15?
That would be 2015.
Okay, yeah, that's right. I didn't come into Keller until 18, 19, right? We met, right? So you originally joined Keller from day one?
I interviewed at 2 or 3 places, and I just didn't. I found it to be cold, that cold kind of corporate environment. Like a lot of my Cornell friends went into that, and that wasn't for me. It wasn't my personality.
So a lot of your friends went into the real estate
finance. Well, they went into finance and some other corporate kind of things, and doctor, lawyer, finance. A lot of my friends. So that wasn't for me. I did some corporate in terms of when I was working with my brother-in-law, an office of 25 people. And it was very laid back, but there was elements that were, you have to be here a certain hour, a certain time, and certain, but that wasn't for me. And so when I went around to a couple of companies, and then I went to a random seminar, and I met somebody from Keller Williams, and I was blown away by what they were pushing with the culture and the importance of that, and it really spoke to me at a really difficult time when my father passed, and I wanted to change careers, and it was a place that I could call home.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Which is, and it is. I think that's I thought that was amazing. Even what you guys did prior to me coming into the city, because I always said we would have never made it in the city if I was the one that started there. Is because it would have been Keller from day one, where you guys. We were talking about this a couple of meetings ago in this city, and it was interesting. People were trying to make it explainable, and it's very hard to explain the situation that you guys were in the city, because it was working really well, but it wasn't, right? And, Allan went in there, and again, I owe Allan the world for what he did for us with Keller Williams in New York City. I thought he, did extraordinary. He brought the company to the next level because of the way he did it, but he did it by bringing it, like a mom and pop feel into that world.
Yeah.
And when you guys created that, you were together from, I guess, day one, right? Because you guys started in the Trump building, if I'm not mistaken, right? And then
moved out. Then we moved out, moved to a couple of offices, and I found that the education was incredible, the instruction was incredible. Can I come shadow your open house, see how this is done? It was open arms.
Correct. It was all.
I mean, at some point, things got maybe too big with too many people. I don't know, but at the end of the day,
But you were a newer agent.
I was a new agent.
I
had some sales experience, and I was a little more mature. Not very strange to say that, but it it was just a welcoming environment, and I plugged in hard with the courses and asking stupid questions. I think there's some value there, right? You know, seeing it up close and having agents say, "Hey, come check out my open house. You're more than welcome to." And that inviting feeling was what I needed. And I owe Keller Williams everything.
So I remember meeting you our first time. I don't know if you remember this. We met in WeWorks.
Yes.
And
You were wearing a very, very lovely light blue sweater. I remember it with your tattoo show.
Yeah, you were all into that. But I remember, and it was the one thing I got in that when I was going through the process was the people that stayed in the environment really cared.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody cared in that, which was so great, which made my decision that much easier, and I'm sure your decision that much easier too. And I found that amazing because you hear what goes on in the city, and it's not warm and fuzzy, really, when, you know, at least when I was coming in, these are the stories I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And, but you guys had some real big bonding that you guys went through and put it together.
Absolutely.
How hard was it to start in the city, like with the Keller Williams, and then grow it? Because again, there's more to you than just selling real estate, especially when you're building something like you guys built before I got there. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, there was some distractions, right? And you know, being part of that was a great growing experience also to see how.
Because Leslie was your TL, right?
Yeah, we had a couple different TLs there, and the important thing has always been, I think, that's made this great is consistency. Sure. And so with the consistency of the Keller Williams model, and really, you know, I would read the book and the model, and then I saw some bits of it in that earlier iteration of Keller Williams.
Sure.
And then when you came on, I saw a lot more of the actual model up close and personal, whereas just reading it about it and how, you know, run a business and how market centers are run. And I think you really brought that Keller Williams, you know, model and approach to it, which was very different than what we had seen. We had a bunch of us that were there, core OG, you know, people there, and, you know, we were really concerned because we loved the place.
You really did.
And I think that was obvious, right, when you came in.
It's one of the main reasons I did what I did with it. And I'm so grateful for that and the experience that I saw you guys go through, and the togetherness was amazing. And then what happened afterwards when we all of those people that came back, you know, and flooded the marketplace with, you know, all of these people that saw it actually running like a Keller. But you had an interesting story, right? Because I met you again. It was probably 2018, 2019. We hit it off. We were friends, I think, from day one. At least in my eyes, we were more like brothers from day one. You know, and that was a lot of you guys. I formed that bond with you guys. But you know, me and you really.
I remember you throwing my computer in the back of your truck as we were moving into a new office. Yeah, you were like a moving company. I don't know if it's because you're cheap or, you know,
I'm cheap.
just a good, but mostly because you're a friend and bonding, and it was great.
Mark, that was the best. Mark Chin's face. Who we getting to move?
You.
So, he did not know what he signed up.
Yeah.
Him and Bobby.
But back and forth from offices in your truck.
Oh man, I'm cheap. But no.
But who's willing to do that?
Exactly.
Right? That's you got to go on board and work with that person that's willing to literally throw their desk on the back and say, hey, let's go set up new shop and do it right.
That's right. Like I said, you jump on I'll ask you to jump on my back, and together we'll take it to the next level. And we did. We did really well, and we're continuing to do really well in the city, and I'm very proud of what we're doing there. But you got into we came in there at a crazy time. We came in during COVID.
Could you throw in any more issues with COVID when you're taking on a business?
I literally I stalled it out, me and Brian, and we were going through it. And I remember Brian closing on the region, and then 3 days later I closed on the market center, right? Because I wanted to do the region with Brian and Mike and the togetherness with them, because you know. I just thought that would be the best fix for it. And then, so it was 3 days for him, 3 days for me, and then boom, we get shut down.
Yeah.
And the world gets turned upside down.
Upside down.
So, you know, all my TLs are freaking out, all my employees are freaking out. And, you know, I promised them a few things that I would do. Like I told a couple of them that, look, I'm going to cover your salaries for at least a year, year and a half. I'll refinance my house if worse comes to worse, and we'll go out there and do this together. And it created that bonding where they knew they can trust me, and then from there, the agents really took off, and the market was a different place. And I remember specifically watching you because you at that time really developed your rental business, correct?
Yes. So
If I'm not mistaken.
yeah.
I know you did it prior, but this is where you really took off. What did you do? Because that was
So we were all sort of shut down from showings, right? It was not deemed essential in the first 5-6 months in New Jersey, which I became licensed, and eventually you could show homes. And so, I have this portfolio. I was working with one of the larger landlords in the city with 60 buildings and 1,200 apartments. How do you rent them out? People are leaving. You can't go in to show them.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing.
What do you do? So I had some foresight before this all sort of happened, and I was one of the first people to be using in the city 3D tours, for example. And so I had an army of people doing the 3D tours in apartments, and I essentially spent the 5 months renting out apartments sight unseen over the phone, and people pointing and clicking throughout the apartment online. I tell them, spin around here and go here. We did over 600 transactions. Basically,
God, I remember my hand hurting, freaking all the checks I had to write because
yeah. We
wanted to kill you.
I did quite a bit of business, and I gained a bunch of weight. I got my health problems all started. So there's not always the rosy side of doing all that business. But we had the foresight of these tours, and I got it.
What was the foresight? Like, how did you understand that? Like,
it was a connection to, we have a lot of people that relocate to New York, right? And so they can't always find the weekend to come and see apartments and then miss out on some and then have to come back for another weekend. Logistically, it's
impossible.
It's impossible sometimes, So having known about that tech and being introduced to some of the vendors doing that technology was critical. And so
were you the only guy in the city doing it at the time?
There was one other company doing it, but it was a small company. It was me and one other person.
Were you the first to do it, or was it them and you got the idea?
I don't exactly know. I was one other person doing it.
That's so interesting.
That's it. And I.
How many people are doing it now?
Almost everybody.
That's pretty cool.
It's very cool, yeah. And so awesome. There's some other tech I'm looking into, so this is also pretty cool. But being able to connect with people on a phone call, I was doing that in sales in the jewelry business, but then having that extra tech piece to it while they're on the phone with me or Zooming with me, who knew what the hell that was, and I was able to walk people through tours and navigate them and narrate them, and we successfully rented out apartments.
How many did you do?
We did over 600 in that
time.
And that first year, and then we did a ton. We continued that business for a few years doing the rentals until some shifts happened in my business.
That's insane.
Yeah, we've done over 1,600 transactions. At this point, I've seen it all.
And we talked about this numerous times. I had you on Masterminds, and we were talking about it. What goes in? Because you hear Keller Williams agents. Like I know a couple of people. I'm not going to mention names, but 2,100 transactions, 4,000 transactions.
Yeah.
That's not the city, though. Like, how do you do 600 transactions? Like, I did half of that, and I was good.
It wasn't just me. I wish I could take all that credit, right? We have the systems in place to take the applications and do the showings and do all the logistics needed for a good experience.
How do you handle 600 applications? Because you have to be the main guy.
Right? Do jewelry in December if you want to know what it's really like.
Really?
When I worked with my brother-in-law, there were 3 days in a row I would not sleep. It was that wild. We had a deal with eBay at some point where we were shipping 40,000 pieces of jewelry. You find the system, you fine-tune it, and I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I was doing things, and I had virtual admin. That was also sort of brand new. I had already had virtual admin.
But you have to teach them, right?
Yeah, but there's I teach some of this in some classes that I do. It's just really loving and being passionate about something. You'll find the best way to make it work if that's something you're really passionate about and it's your job and all that.
And then to stay on that a little bit, right? Because it's fascinating to me. What what's the process in the city to take them to a rental? So I want to rental. I want to rent an apartment in the city.
Yeah.
And what's that like? Not sitting down with me in person.
Sure.
Right, because that's the bug, that thing. Every time I rented an apartment, I didn't rent too many. I think I rented one in my whole life, and then we bought a house. But me and Diana went. We sat in the office. We gave them our credit stuff. We gave them all our paperwork. We saw a couple of places. This is what we wanted. We had to go through that whole process. But we were there. We were engaged.
Sure.
Right. I trusted you to see my paperwork, and I brought it to you. Again, what's that like? And I'm sorry to be so, because I'm not getting it. How do you do that just over the phone with somebody? How do you get that trust?
So it starts with a quick communication. A couple of the biggest problems I hear from renters is that the agent didn't get back to me quickly.
Okay.
I saw listings that didn't match the pictures. And so our ethos is you don't go more than a few minutes without responding. We get a contact for a lead, or we get a contact on one of our listings.
So this is going to sound crazy, though. That's going to, all of that, just doing what you're doing, is going to get you to get my social security number.
It's that simple. If you're quick to respond, you're pleasant, and you're, I'm also letting people in on the process behind the scenes. Is I think one of the other real great things about what we do differently is I tell them the things that I go through, the things to look out for, the nuances of something. I went to take me to a car dealership. I'm like blacklisted. I'm the worst person to go to a car dealership with. But the one person that I found, he said, hey, you're out here on the 15th, come back on the 29th. I go, you're sending me away? He's like, yeah. The best deals will come on the last day or two of the month. When I bring you in, when you do come in, the manager's going to come in and tell you to get these tires, whatever package. You don't need them. Get this package instead. Sure. So somebody walking you through that is, I think, one of the most valuable things you can do to build a bond over the phone or on a Zoom. Our first consultation is the critical one. That's where we Zoom or hop on a call. If we can meet in person, great, but who has time for that,
And back then you couldn't meet.
You couldn't meet anyway. So
anyway.
Hopping on a Zoom, spending the 30 minutes per person, even if it was for a lower price point or a higher price point, we treat everyone as if this is the most important thing going on in their life.
What was your price point?
It really varied. I mean, we had up $2,000 to $10,000 listings, but roughly 4 to 5 was sort of our sweet spot of the couple of landlords we were working with. And we treated them all the same, and that process, we ran them through that.
And then in between that, you were selling properties also.
So we were doing mostly rentals. We did occasional sales, for a friend or something like that. But I was so singularly focused because on a rental, you get paid in a couple days. It's beautiful, right? Yep. Some of these sales transactions, you go commercial, you don't get paid for years. Mm-hmm. So, what happened at some point, the account that I was working with, that was a huge account for us, start selling off their properties. So I had to reinvent myself, which was one of the crazier parts of my reevaluation and reinvention.
Interesting. So take me through that if you want. Take me through that now. So you get out of when did when did it slow down?
So it was sort of 2023, and with about a month's notice, my whole business got sort of got shut down in a lot of ways. You could do a couple things. You could cry a little bit. I'm not gonna say I didn't, but you have to sit down and say, hey, what do I got? I got a family. I got 2 kids. I got my wife. I got a house that I bought, knock on wood, because of that great account or 2 I had. And so I basically said to myself, sales is the same as rentals, just with different numbers and different couple little steps here and there, but it's the same thing you're doing, building trust, protecting people, and being a great negotiator. I mean, I look at myself and I say, hey, what would I want out of a real estate agent? And that was one of the things that I kind of coached some people on.
So let me ask you this: what you said? What is it you would want as a real estate agent?
I want somebody that's a very good negotiator. I think that's a critical skill set. All of the other things and being nice and having fun when you're doing showings, great. I think that ultimately we deal in contracts, and being able to negotiate the best deal for your client and knowing how to do that and how to get people kind of to fall in line with some of the things that your client needs. The second thing for me, if I were to hire a real estate agent, would be trust. I mean, if I have a great negotiator and somebody I can trust implicitly and check occasionally here and there, to me is the most important thing for me. some people want to have their hand held a little bit more. It's their first time transaction. We'll do that. But ultimately, I think those two factors, two characteristics, are really the ones that we really work hard at. I'm reading books about negotiation. I'm reading old scripts what other agents are using in the field. And
well, you used to go back and look at the FBI and stuff like that, right? Negotiating on
absolutely body language, some of the stuff in psychology actually, obviously help with that. But reading certain books and the jewelry business had tons of negotiation, and you're negotiating diamonds, and you're negotiating metals, and you're negotiating labor.
So let me ask you this, because I did security for the the Diamond District back in the day, and when I owned the security company, I got into that world. What was it? Triple markup for jewelry, right?
Yeah.
For what
these little books that there's 3 little keys at the bottom.
That's right. Yeah, and it was triple markup, right? And diamonds were triple markup, whatever it was, right? And then that adjusted.
Yeah.
How do you go from that, because you know what you're making, to real estate? Now, it's not triple markup. It sometimes could be crazy markup.
Sure.
It depends on the market where we're going. So how do you go from that mindset to that?
Well, there was the consistency, right? I had a 9 to 5 job, which also I did work some weekends and evenings with my brother-in-law. I talked to him on weekends about it. It's a different mindset when you're kind of eat what you kill. And again, back to the tennis. If I don't do my lead generating and talking to as many people as possible, whether it's the person at the bagel store in town or on the block I'm working with, or making nice with the doorman, and or if I don't practice the scenarios, like from in a listing appointment, or from working the buyer, or from even working a renter, if I'm not doing those things on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, then I'm not going to get the trophy, because I got nobody else to lean on in that team, like in the hockey or these other team sports that we're into.
Yeah, you screw up.
That's it. And it's not just me. I'm screwing up. Wife, kids. Plans for the future. Yeah. Vacation once a year.
Yeah,
if I can client. If I'm not on my A game practicing, and the world's changing, and you got to be able to adjust your objection handling skills and things like that. So, I find every day I'm doing some bit of that work that I did back when I was playing tennis, and just taking a hopper of balls and hitting serves for an hour. That's sort of what I equate, lead generating and talking to people and all that.
So when you're doing all of this stuff, and you're crazy busy, and the world's going a million miles a minute, what are you looking for in talent to help you? Like, what's that? You get your assistant first, obviously.
Sure.
Then what are you looking for?
People I can trust. I've made a couple of mistakes in some of my team building where I just really had a great relationship, and we can kind of talk about things in sports and really just like each other. But at the end of the day, they did some questionable things on a showing, or they left keys at home by accident, or it was a consistent issue like that, and I kind of brush it off. So somebody that's willing to learn and grow and be nimble is somebody I would love to know and work with. You can have all the connections in the world, but if you don't know how to talk to them, it's useless, right? So if you're willing to say, hey, I know a lot of people, or I know nobody, but I want to practice with, scripts and objections, and go ahead and get on the phone and start calling people. I can work with that. I'd rather new people sometimes, because it's hard. You're basically molding the habits. Sometimes the older agents that have been in the business for a while, it's really hard to break the habits. They have some bad habits.
Yep.
And I found that a lot of people that I spoke to that have come from other brokerages to Keller Williams, they were like, it was like their eyes wide open for the first time, and some of the systems and things like that, and that was it's one of the more inspiring things to see. When you have an agent that didn't know about Keller Williams, Keller who, and then they come in and they're like, wow, this can be done this way, and you can have this and foster this, have this, be a part of this great environment, and inspirational and educational, and kind of inclusive, right? So I'll take that person over somebody that has a lot of raw talent that I couldn't trust. I would rather have that trustworthy person.
Awesome.
Keys to the apartment are very valuable.
What are because again, there's so much we could talk about here. I'm just I think the craziest. What's the craziest rental that you ever had to deal with?
craziest rental. I think everybody's sort of gone through this at some point when you have a tenant maybe living in an apartment and you've got to show that apartment, and there could be some unpredictable things that you see or hear about. Like we were doing a bunch of rentals near NYU.
Okay.
And there was a group of college students living in an apartment, and I gave them plenty of notice. I messaged them in 24 hours in advance. I text them also. Text them in the morning, the day of the appointment, the email the day before. We show up and there's empty cans of booze all over the apartment, and there's somebody's naked on the couch, and then you got somebody's parent is behind them viewing the apartment. The one apartment had like spray painted in it by so one time we came in and somebody didn't tell me that their mother was visiting and she was in the shower. I mean, there's just
crazy stories like
that.
Yeah.
So you see some of that stuff. Some of the deals that I've done recently were really the most important, where it's like people, were selling their home and they can now retire.
Sure.
They can move on to a different chapter of their life. That's the most meaningful. Like I got those stories where somebody's naked on a couch and there's beer cans everywhere, but then there's the ones that are like because of you and your actions and the things you were able to accomplish.
Help them.
I'm in Florida and I'm with my family now, and I'm out of bankruptcy, or that's the stuff that means so much more. Maybe it's because I'm a dad now. I don't know, and family, but those are like the most. That's what I work for. Getting that story at the end. Hey, I can't afford to live here anymore. The bank's going to come in, or the building is going to come in. Yeah. It's horrible.
Yeah, it's tough.
And I think sometimes as agents we forget that there's people behind here. Right. I think sometimes we get those keys and we think for those 2-3 months that we own the apartment. Mm-hmm. I think that happens a lot. It's an interesting thing.
No, you're right. Yeah.
And but being a part of that next phase is really what keeps me going now.
Sure.
And we have stories of people in a war coming here, or you have people that are retiring, or they lost somebody.
That's right.
And there's a life behind these keys. And so
not too many people think about that.
No, I don't think, I wish it was more. I wish there was more of that. Sure. I think our industry would have better communication amongst ourselves if there was like an understanding that this isn't like a reality show on the, that we're, here, take this offer, goodbye, no, click. Yep. There's better ways of communicating. I think there's some room for improvement. I think that's a lot of the stuff that I learned here at Keller, frankly.
It's crazy. So you get out of that. Now you end up getting your license in Jersey. Mm-hmm. Take me through that now. So you...
Yeah. So part of my reinvention was, we lost a big account. We had to sit down and how can I replace this income? And so sales and opening my, I grew up not having all the sneakers I wanted and things I wanted. And so I had some intimidation jumping into sales originally, being in some nicer homes or just being at that price point, any price point really. It's just a rental. Somebody can move in, they can move out at some point. This is a longer term thing and a more important transaction. So, being, getting involved more with sales in New York and doing more and getting more into like marketing and postcards and some other ads. And at the same time, I live in New Jersey, so I split my time. I was like, I live in New Jersey. My wife's from there. My kids are there. My family, a lot of my family's there. So I might as well try to tap into the neighborhoods and that I live surrounding where I live and some of the.
You like
areas.
doing that, or?
I love it.
Really?
Yeah, I love real estate is very different in New Jersey, and I think that's one of the great things about hiring my team is that we are in the suburbs, we are in the city, and I can have a conversation because there's different things happening in New Jersey than there are in New York, and sometimes you can see the trends where they're going, where they were, and we can have that conversation with. A lot of New Yorkers went to New Jersey, sure. So we can have that conversation. So especially condos and co-ops in New Jersey, we do really well in.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I got my license about 2 years ago, and my partner Michael Parker that I work with in New Jersey has been doing this for 10 years also, and so we can cover anything in New York and New Jersey, basically. And
so interesting.
Yeah. I had to reinvent myself. It was I had no choice. And
it's so funny.
The pizza and bagels aren't as good in New Jersey, so but you can't have everything.
I remember getting offers like in Westchester to do deals, and I would never do it because I never wanted to work where I lived.
Yeah.
When my kids were playing, sports, I didn't want to be bothered on the field talking about real estate. It was just I'm working here, leave me alone. And that's how I was. I was always fascinated with people that can actually do it, and you see it, especially with especially with the Long Island offices. You see more of people living and selling their neighbors' houses, and you're putting an actual neighbor next to you. So I was never able to do that. I don't know why. I just couldn't do it. It was just not me, where I don't want to pick my neighbor. I thought
it's a little too familiar, right? Like sometimes we do these deals and then we don't go back to the area of the building, and so it's on your block or. I had to get past that also. I began a few months ago marketing to the towns and getting my face on, on a bus ad and things like that.
Sure. So what's the difference, as we're talking about,
Yeah.
what's the difference between a New York City, and not an agent, but the sale,
Yeah.
and a Jersey sale? A lot of people want to know that.
So I think it's a lot calmer.
A lot calmer, okay.
It's a lot less ego. I will say that in New Jersey transactions, I will say by a lot.
Interesting. I would have thought the opposite.
No, I think a lot of the sharp skills that I've honed in New York have been useful for me in New Jersey in negotiating.
Okay.
I think that there's less drama. There's less of this.
So
It's
there's
about
more-
me.
There's more drama
New York, I
in
feel.
New York City
Yeah.
than wow. I wouldn't have thought that.
I don't know if it's the reality shows. It might be. I have no idea.
That's interesting.
But it's a calmer. It's less combative. I love it. I mean, the price points are wildly different, right? You
Sure.
can sell a house $500,000-$600,000 or $1 million, and that's you can have a building vertically that will have 500 of those in it, right? Or 400, 300, 200. So there's a lot more money in New York. That's maybe part of it. I think in some ways, and it's
Wouldn't
also
that keep the drama down now because of the money, or
I think it's because of the money. You would keep it up because there's a lot at risk, and there's the ego part of it, and there's the fast pace.
Sure.
Right, New York is known as the Big Apple city, never sleeps. New Jersey,
we're sleeping?
yeah, you don't pump your own gas. So I think I love that part of it actually because I can shut things on and off. I can have a little breather sometimes in some transactions. Plus, I'm in the city half the week, and the other half I'm in Jersey. So,
Do you ever slip up, like forget you're in Jersey or forget you're in the city?
well, coming out here to Canada basically for the interview. I do sometimes. The congestion pricing has been good for me because it's less traffic and all, but. I got to shut it off and turn it back on in certain ways. Yeah, because the process is a little different too. And the contracts are done differently, and there's some little procedural things. Still have compliance and all the stuff you got to do and disclosure and all that, and the approach with the hospitality and the negotiation, all that's there.
Who's more? And again, probably a silly question. Who's more needy as a client? Is it the city buyers and sellers, or the?
I don't
Or
know
does
if
it
there's much
matter?
of a difference there.
Probably not, right?
I don't think that everybody has their reason for wanting to sell, buy, rent, and their story, which I try to find out their story. Hey, first question a lot of agents ask is, what are you pre-approved or how much? And the first question I ask anybody is, why are you doing this?
Yeah,
why are you
that's what I
buying or
think
why
so.
are you selling?
Makes sense.
How's the market? And I go, well, it depends. A lot of agents say, hey, it's great, it's on fire. I don't want to hear about things on fire. That's,
Scary.
scary, especially if you're buying. If things are on fire, like, why would I want to, So the answer is depends. And so I've honed some of these things. And my answers to the questions are fairly the same with objections and the explanations of things. It's just, there just seems to be less of the ego in the room, I hate to say, in the New Jersey transaction. It's still there. It's just not as consistent. You get the occasional deals where I got to prove something to my buyer and fight you on this and whatever, and that happens anywhere. But it's a city that never sleeps. It's New York. It's what makes it New York. I wouldn't change it.
So looking forward, and if you had that crystal ball,
Yeah.
what do you see 25, 26 looking like for the real estate business, for your business? Let's start with the real estate business in a whole. What's your prediction for 25, 26? Good market?
I think it's going to be roughly the same as last year. I think in a lot of ways, maybe a little bit better. There's the demand is clearly there. And there's a lot of changes to the way we operate, right, with some of the rules and and stuff like that. But I see it being sort of similar to last year. I think it'll come down to maybe to get the same amount of business you had maybe last year, you have to work a little bit harder. And so, doing some things that like the experienced agents don't do as much, the scripts and the objection handling and the lead generation. I think you need to kind of get out of that, become uncomfortable again and start doing some of that stuff. On the way out here, driving out here, I was running through some role playing with some folks in the office.
That's awesome.
Because I have 2 hours to do this, and I want to get it done, and so I can move on to my other activities. I spend 2 hours a day reading. I mean, that's something I never thought I would be doing, and so I think you'll have to work harder and be more nimble this year to do the same amount of business. But I don't think it'll be like tremendous growth. We'll see what's going on with the economy and stuff. But as far as my business, I think I'm already ahead of where I was for a lot of parts of last year.
That's awesome.
I had family stuff I had to take care of last year, and I had to take my eye off the ball on a couple things. But we've already in January, February already beat our numbers from last year and even 2 years ago. So it's
awesome.
We're off to a really good start, and I think I have a lot of that owed to this. Let me go do the uncomfortable stuff, and like where I go, even if it's to the dry cleaner, hey, can I leave a sign out in your dry cleaning window?
Sure.
It doesn't cost you anything. That graphic, I did it with my virtual admin, cost me a few bucks an hour. And so doing some of that extra stuff, and will I think get us back to where we were a couple years ago.
Were you in my masterminds when we were talking about working with the vendor programs and working with all of them? Like,
No, I don't think so.
We'll go over it off the air. We're picking up business in that angle.
Oh yeah, well yeah, that's a huge part of it. We work with attorneys and there's mortgage people and asking for the business, right?
Sure.
So on all my newsletters, email newsletters, and my communications and postcards, I'm including my vendors in there. Hey, I'm giving out business to some vendors. I want to get some of that back this year, and we have some events that we're doing, and tapping into some of that with our vendor partners. I think it's really important to find every avenue, social media, these podcasts, and any way that you can get your name out there. The more people that know you, it's not who you know, it's how many people know you.
Correct. Yeah.
And so getting out there in your ads on social media, and a lot of agents just do the email newsletter. It's not enough now. We have so many other platforms and the social media that you need to really be everywhere if you want to stand out and really find what your brand and your niche is and zero in and make that consistent everywhere you go with it.
Awesome. Yeah. You've done a lot too, right? So you also coach, right? You get into that. What would you tell a newer agent getting into the business right now? Run?
That's funny. Sometimes.
Just refer me to business.
Refer me to business and see you later. I think I would tell the newer agent to definitely shadow as many people as you can.
Okay.
I think part of the coaching that I do is come into my world and see me run an open house. Listen in on a call, on a Zoom. Jump in on the Zoom. I want you there. I want you to see and feel the business. I spent too much time in the classroom. Was one of my first things that I did. I was literally the first 6 months in the business. I was just in the classroom every day, all day long. At some point, you got to cut your teeth and get out there and be around. You gotta touch the when you go shopping, you touch the clothing on the racks. You got to be able to go out there and experience it. So find somebody that you know and trust, and maybe see if they'll let you do some work. When you get your license, if you can run an open house for free, do stuff for free. I mean that's how I got one of my big accounts. I did a couple deals with them. I didn't charge anybody commission. I just got on the radar. So that. Go shadow people. Learn the lingo. Can't learn some of that in the classroom.
That's right.
So doing, even if you're new, don't be scared. Jump on one of these things. I'm running now a objection handling, script practicing, role playing group. There's people of every caliber of experience, brand new, kind of like a little more experience, a year in the business, and then there's people 5, 6, 7, 8 years in there. We can all learn from each other, and so get the lingo down and learn how to communicate best.
It's funny you said that, what you just said, where classroom and, when I came into the business, and I think it was 2003.
Did you have electricity back then?
We did a little bit.
Okay.
It just started coming out, and but we didn't really have classrooms. Everybody was over, making sure nobody saw their leads.
It wasn't collaborative.
It wasn't.
No.
And,
Cutthroat.
But the one thing I could say is I just got thrown out into the mix.
Yeah.
And it was basically you either sink or swim. And people made it, people didn't make it. And then, it was what it was. I was fortunate enough to make it. I didn't think I would because the first year, it basically got beat up by everybody else in the industry. And I was just like, whoa.
It's demoralizing that
It
first
really
year.
is. It really is. It's hard. And, you don't see that much anymore because, again, I think a lot of people took our lead and, because we did change the real estate business, Keller Williams, by coming in and doing what we did. And, I was saying this yesterday in a meeting where we should be flattered about this, where so many people copy us. I was talking to a couple of agents last week, and I don't know why. It was just a lot of them are calling me up just to talk about business, and I'm talking about outside companies. And the one thing they said is, do you realize how much Keller Williams changed the industry? And these are guys that 20 years in the business, 15 years in the business. I was talking to somebody yesterday, 30-something years in the business, and they said, the one regret that he had, I'm not going to mention names, obviously, but hopefully he is joining us.
Tell me afterwards.
Yeah, I will. But his thing was, I went to see Gary 15 years ago. And he said, the one regret is that I didn't do it 15 years ago. And and he's still
Sooner.
not with us, right? And he said, that's so many agents out there are like that. But he said, what the interesting thing is, so many companies copied our lead. And, remember the days where it's a great day at Keller Williams and stuff like that. I remember being in an Infinity dealer here in Long Island, and I'm listening to the lady at the desk, and she goes, it's a great day at Infinity. And I'm sitting there going, you freaking, thief. It's like, but it's so cool to hear that stuff we're able to create. Where do you think the trend setting is going to go in the future, right? Because there's so much AI and everything. What do you
I
see
still
it
think this is
evolving
still a people business at
You
the end
do?
of the day. Yeah, well, there's people behind the keys, as we spoke about, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so they have real world things that they have to accomplish, and there's the good, the bad, the ugly reasons for the reasons they're doing something, renting, buying, selling, whatever it is. So there's going to be that element there. Can we speed up certain things? Can we get comps a little bit faster together? Can we be, with some AI stuff, can we be, accessible 24 hours a day where you call me up and I've got, my voice on something answering a question about my business? There's things you can do but it's still going to be a people business. I don't think we're anywhere near the point where we're just eliminated in any capacity. I think there's these 6 parties, and there's the buyer, the seller, the attorneys, and the clients, and so you still have to navigate all that. I think it's we're a distance away from that. There's going to be some speed towards, in my opinion, of getting the transaction a little bit more smoother and some elements quicker, and that'll be there. But it's still a people business. It's I guess you have restaurants out there where there's a robot making the food, but there's still that human element. I think is not going away anytime soon.
And then.
Because it's not robots owning the homes and buying the homes,
Correct.
right? So I think you still have to have that interface and interaction, and have there's certain conversations there that you can't do so coldly.
So this is going to be hard to answer for you because it was so long ago. Were you at, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, family reunion, when they were talking about virtual reality in the real estate game, how they were going to show homes with the VR?
Oh, yeah.
Were you in that?
Yeah, I saw that.
And it's actually taking you through the house, and you're seeing it, and then.
I mean, some of that stuff with the 3D tours that I was doing during COVID, and still a lot of people do now. And there's you got the drones now for the other properties and things like that. So you'll have this new innovations and things to make the decision a little smoother. Like, I love using the 3D tour technology because that person already is spun around that whole house and that apartment, and that they're just coming in to make sure there's not there's no weird smells, and there's no loud noises, and there's no somebody living in there, But I think that there's got to be someone to tell that story. The 3D tour helps, the VR, all that helps, and from a distance, people showed up to my listings and they've already kind of seen the place. They just want to feel you out and see if you can get a deal done, or I think that will not go away. It will only get sped up, but the agent's not going anywhere.
No, I don't think so. No. I thought one of the craziest ones that I heard lately was
you have a robot spinning around a live robot. I can just kind of tell, hey, move the camera around the whole space. I see all that. I guess still got to step foot in it a lot of the time.
You still got to go in. This one was interesting. I'm not going to mention an agent's name. He's with us.
Tell me later.
It was they were at an event for their houses, and what this cat had on the wall was pictures of different houses that he had listed, or apartments or whatever. And they had the glasses, and they looked into that house and that code or whatever it was, and then that client went through, because they were at this event looking at houses, so it wasn't really an open house, it was just an event, and this person's now looking through it, and then each one, he had somebody on his team as the virtual reality, I guess, person in there, in that room, but they were also present at the party or at the event, and then when they got out of it, who do they see at the event? They make sure, like, when they watch them, 5 minutes later, they're going to walk by them and see if they notice them. And he said every single one of them got noticed within that 5 minutes. Like, oh, my God, you're the person that was just on the VR tour. What can we do to get this house? And he said he's gotten more success out of that than one-on-one shows. Well, not more success.
Well, we got to remember that people take in information differently. So there might be some techie person that would love all that. And then there's going to be somebody that doesn't speak. That clearly doesn't speak to them. So you're gonna have different people that are gonna appreciate that sort of thing, and you're gonna have people that are like, I don't have a flip. I have a flip phone still, or I don't have a phone. So, but it's cool stuff. Some of the technology that's coming out is wild. People that are resisting, I think, will have a tougher time in the industry. Resisting incorporating some of that stuff are going to have the tougher time, as opposed to people that are more nimble and willing to, get out of their comfort zone. As you said, you have to be able to getting out of your comfort zone is a difference, and a lot of times in what you're making. I mean, if it was easy, everybody would do it, and there's always I got a 6-year-old. Everything's new for him, but then once he gets into it, you can't stop him, and it's he's got that going for him. So you got to have that childlike kind of a mentality in certain things. I never thought I'd be reading. Well, it's audiobooks, right? But it's listening to 2 hours worth of stuff. 1 hour I do of business oriented things and reading some great books on that, and then for personal and health and financial stuff. And so I never thought I'd find myself doing that, and I've noticed I enjoy the business better now. I enjoy practicing the scripts and objections. I don't have to do that in the moment, right? So I'm ready for it, and I'm doing it in a very natural way. I don't read from a script in terms of it's like a robot, but it helps to be able to be prepared. Just like tennis, when I practice for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, I'd practice my serve for a 1.5 hour match.
So we're coming to an end, unfortunately. We'll sit there for hours.
With you.
Yeah, this was great. I learned so much about you and about the business. Got to have you back, obviously. And one more question I have, because hopefully that's the person that's coming back.
Yeah.
How do you take a client that you just did a deal with, bring him into a fantasy football league, let him get his ass kicked by a guy like me, not you, because you suck too. You're horrible. You tell everybody how to run their team, and then you're in last place.
Exactly. Accurate.
How do you do that? Aren't you supposed to let the guy win? He's a client.
No. So you know what? Life is short. I can choose to not take certain clients on, and people could definitely not be inspired by this, be here. But I become friendly with a lot of the clients because I get to find the reasons why they're selling and what they're going through, and things get you get close with somebody, and so I have this client. Jerry was living in New Jersey, and he had plans to relocate. And moved down to Florida, and he met me through another person that I had a successful transaction with. He grilled me for 45 minutes, and and then he was sold. I met him in person with my partner and everything, and then ultimately, we got him. We sold his place in Jersey. He had another investment property in Brooklyn, and so we did a New Jersey and New York transaction with him. and he was able to move down to Florida. I just visited him last week.
That's awesome.
I was down there last week. We talk every other day. We talk about sports, and he went further than me in the fantasy football league. But you know, these are people behind these keys, and so they get to know me and my story. I always share my story about how I got in the business and my father and things like that. I think it's important for people to know that I'm a real person too, and I'm going to take what they entrust in me very seriously. And so, Jerry, maybe we can get him on one day and he can share his experience. We definitely butted heads on a couple little things.
Yep.
But ultimately, we're friends. I saw him last week when I was down in Florida, and I think he would give an interesting side of the story too.
Well, that's the next one we're going to have. We're going to set it up with Julia because I think that would be great.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Allan, thank you. Learned a lot. Thank you. Love you. Looking forward to the next time we meet.
You bet, pal. Good to see you.